St. Peters. Congressman Stephen Horsford joining us right now on the line. Congressman, I really do appreciate you coming on. How are you?
I'm great, Brian. Thank you for having me on your show.
Appreciate it. So we're going to get to a lot of issues in a short period of time, Congressman. I want to start with gun control. I know how passionate you are about this issue, and we agree on it. You know, obviously losing your father to gun violence. Congressman, this might be a loaded question. Why is it that we've gone decades here where Republicans refuse to do anything for the most part when it comes to gun control? Why is that?
Well, unfortunately, they're controlled by the gun lobby in Washington, D.C., and not the people of America who overwhelmingly support common sense gun safety legislation. Now, last month, Congress passed and the president signed into law the first gun control reform bill in almost 3 decades. It's a bill that includes my legislation from Break the Cycle of Violence, but on the key provisions of the bill around gun safety, it's about making sure that we have increased background checks for individuals who are under 21. It requires more gun sellers to register as federally licensed firearm dealers. It closes the so-called boyfriend loophole, which left out unmarried partners and domestic violence to make sure that they are also protected. And it increases funding for mental health programs and school safety. Now, one of the most important provisions, I believe, is the $2 billion of anti-violence funding for our schools and our communities, including my provision around breaking the cycle of violence.
Congressman, when you hear from the right, people say we need to harden schools and we need to arm teachers, and it always seems like they come up with more guns are the answer, not less guns. And I've always been for an assault weapons ban. I would imagine you are for that as well. Do you think that'll ever get done? And what do you make of the so many people on the right in the back pockets of the NRA that seem to make every excuse except for the actual guns that are being used?
Well, the House will vote this week, in fact, on an assault weapon ban. These are weapons of war. Literally, when you look at what happened in Uvalde at that school, when you look at the incident in Buffalo, even in our hometown of Las Vegas, in the 1 October shooting that killed 58 people, we must address all forms of gun violence, and banning assault weapons and these weapons of war is a step that Congress will be taking in the House later this week.
I'm happy to hear that, Congressman. If you're just joining us, Congressman Stephen Horsford, let's talk about the abortion issue. Did you ever think, Congressman, in your lifetime that Roe versus Wade would be overturned in the Supreme Court? What do you make of somebody like Clarence Thomas? What do you make of these Supreme Court justices that voted for this? And, you know, I understand in Nevada that's not going to happen so long as Democrats are running this state. But there's a lot of women out there that are very scared, Congressman. What would you say to them?
First, I understand their fear. I understand their anxiety. This is not an issue that only affects women. It affects men and families as well. And yeah, you're right. After 50 years of precedent on something as fundamental as a woman's freedom, and I use the word freedom so intentionally, to make her own healthcare decisions about her life with the consultation of her physician and anyone else that she chooses to bring into that process. We have an extreme, ideologically driven Supreme Court, 3 of the members that were appointed recently by Donald Trump, and now Republicans in Congress that are plotting a nationwide ban to criminalize abortion in all 50 states. My opponent has been endorsed by the very groups who want to institute these national bans to criminalize abortion. This is not the direction that the majority of Nevadans or Americans want us to go, and that is why we have to do everything that we can to codify the federal law into for Roe versus Wade into statute. Yes, we have protections in Nevada law, but we need to make sure that those protections are instituted across the country, because what we cannot have is a patchwork of laws where some rights are protected in some places that forces women, to travel across state lines in order to get the health care that they need. On top of that, they are also trying to now ban contraception. Can you believe this?
Awful.
In the 2022 that they are trying to ban that. So we passed a legislation last week, called the Right to Contraception, to guarantee the right to obtain and use birth control as established in Griswold, including oral contraception, emergency contraception, and IUDs. Now, unfortunately, 195 Republicans voted against guaranteeing women a right to contraception.
Oh, that is amazing.
And we also had to vote last week to pass the Respect for Marriage Act, because embedded in the Roe versus Wade decision was the provisions around the Defense of Marriage Act, which they are also looking to strike down.
Right.
157 Republicans voted against guaranteeing
Can I ask you about that?
Recognition of same-sex and interracial marriages.
Can I ask you about that, Congressman? Because in the first segment I was talking about that. Did you hear about this story about this GOP lawmaker who attends his gay son's wedding 3 days after voting against this Respect to Marriage Act? I mean, how do you even describe a person like that? He goes to his son's wedding and then votes against this Respect to Marriage Act. He's voting against someone like his son. How do you even explain that, Congressman?
Well, he should explain it. I can't, because it's not representative of my priorities. I know what the people of Nevada's 4th sent me to Washington to do, and it's to protect their rights. It's to guarantee their freedom. It's to ensure that we don't go backwards and that we continue to go forward. So I can't defend him. I don't understand how he can look his loved one in the face after having voted against that legislation last week. So someone, I hope, will get an answer from him. But my job right now is to make sure that I defend the rights of Nevada's constituents who are desperate to make sure that Congress and the U.S. Supreme Court does not erode their freedoms or their rights.
Understood. Let's talk a little bit about your opponent, Sam Peters, Congressman. I interviewed him a few years ago. He refuses to come on this show again. Listen, I respect his service to this country, but what do you make? And I'll be honest with you. I'm not a fan of Sam Peters. I don't like the election lies that he endorses when it comes to Donald Trump and, when it comes to gay marriage. I don't agree with him on a lot of issues, but what do you make of a guy that puts in his radio commercial, "Let's go, Brandon"? We all know what that means. What type of example does that set for the voters and for even younger people? When you put that type of rhetoric in a commercial, you talk about critical race theory, which for the most part doesn't exist. I mean, can we be honest here? And I want to give you a chance to talk about him, but this is a guy that is on the far right, the alt-right, that puts these messages in his ads. And I think it's disgusting. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, look, my job is to make sure the voters of Nevada 4th know who I am, what I've done, and my priorities on delivering for them. We'll have plenty of time to talk more about my opponent. What I know of him is, he supports the big lie that Donald Trump lost the election, and he literally did not support the Nevada electors that were certified to present the votes from Nevadans. He wants to dismantle the Affordable Care Act and defund Social Security. Those are not the priorities of most Nevadans. Again, he's against a woman's freedom to make her own health care decisions, as we just talked about, and so many other issues that are out of the mainstream of the majority of my constituents. What I've been focused on is reducing the cost of living, from housing to childcare to prescription drugs. It's what I am known for, is fighting and delivering for my constituents before I was ever a congressman. When I served in the state Senate and when I ran the Culinary Academy of Las Vegas, the largest job training center in the state. And so I know what my constituents expect, and that is someone that is not an ideologue, that is not an extreme conservative, and they want someone who's going to focus on their needs and their priorities. And right now, that's the increasing cost of rent. Rent has gone up 30% in our city, in Las Vegas, in the last year. 1 in 3 homes in parts of my district are owned by out-of-state corporate investors. That's why I just introduced the Home Act in order to hold these corporate investors accountable for gouging my constituents and people in other communities across the country. They didn't care about investing in our community before, but now they want to buy up our properties, gouge veterans, gouge seniors, and middle-class families that are trying to make a living and keep a roof over their head. Those are the priorities that my constituents talk to me about, and those are the issues that I'm laser focused on getting done on their behalf.
What would you say, Congressman, to so many people on the right that want to blame Joe Biden for inflation, for gas prices? I mean, I always say, listen, inflation's up all over the world for the most part. So are gas prices. I debate Republicans on this all the time. I'm sure you have people coming up to you saying, you know, Joe Biden's responsible for all your problems. What would you say about that? Is Joe Biden responsible at all? Is the White House responsible at all? Are Democrats responsible at all for inflation and for the gas prices and for, you know, for a lot of people struggling in this country, you know, paying for those types of things?
Well, first, let me say, I understand, particularly in my district and the people that I represent, that they have struggled with the cost of food, of gas, now housing, and there are different factors that are contributing to why they are experiencing those high costs. You know, I'm not here to shift blame. I'm not here to assign blame. We do need to know the root causes of what causes these inflationary issues. Obviously, the war in Ukraine, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the limited oil supply early in the process contributed to some of the gas prices. But do you know, Brian, today is the 43rd day straight the gas prices have continued to decline.
Right.
We're working to make sure they continue to go down. And that's why I've worked to hold this administration accountable, to provide more of our domestic supply of energy and to release more supply of oil so that we can bring down the cost. It's why I pushed the administration to tackle the issues around food insecurity and the lack of formula when it was being experienced in our communities. But right now, the issue that most of my constituents are talking about is the cost of housing, the cost of rent, the fact that they are being priced out by these corporate investors who are not invested in our state. They've come in they've bought more homes in the last year than they bought in the last 7. And then they've literally taken processes to evict people at a higher rate. They don't provide the same level of maintenance. And if there's one issue that I want to make sure that I address on behalf of my constituents is bringing down the cost of housing to make housing more affordable so that people can keep a roof over their head. That's why I introduced the Home Act. I've already gotten a hearing in Ways and Means on this issue, and I'm pushing my colleagues to make sure that this is a priority bill that we get done so that we can provide relief to people in my district and all across this country.
Couple more quick questions for you, Congressman, and we really do appreciate your time. We're speaking with Congressman Stephen Horsford. Couple more quick questions for you. I have to ask you about the January 6th hearings. I know right now this is probably not your focus, but I guess two-part question. Have you had a chance to watch the hearings? And I guess my second part to that is, if you have, do you believe that they've shown enough evidence for Donald Trump to be charged with a crime? What are your thoughts on the January 6th hearings as a whole?
Well, I have watched, like most Americans have watched, the proceedings. I want to commend Chairman Benny Thompson and Republican member Liz Cheney, the vice chair, for their work in getting to the truth. I don't have a predetermined conclusion on what should be done, but I believe that the evidence and the information and the truth should ultimately be brought out to the American public. Ultimately, a recommendation needs to be made to the Department of Justice, and I do hope that Attorney General Garland and the Department of Justice does its job and holds anyone accountable for the attack, not only on the U.S. Capitol building, but on the democracy that we hold so dear. There was a coup They were not successful. It was an attempted coup. But had they been successful, where would we be right now as a country, as a nation, as a people, had they been successful? I was there that day. I saw the shattered windows. I saw Capitol Police who were affected, some of whom lost their lives. I know staff members who are still experiencing trauma from the events of that day. And I know constituents all across this country are concerned about the underpinnings of our democracy. And when anyone calls into question the results of an election because they didn't win, because they didn't like the results, and then they literally incite an insurrection. And my own opponent supported this big lie and continues to. And this is the problem. Even with information, with evidence, with the facts and the truth, they still support the big lie. And that is not what the majority of Nevadans or Americans believe. And it's why this upcoming November election is going to be so important for the future of our nation.
I agree, Congressman. When you look at people like Jim Marchant and Adam Laxalt and Michelle Fiore, I mean, there are people just locally here in Las Vegas that support the big lie. It seems like the way Republicans are winning elections these days is supporting conspiracy theories. It seems like correct me if I'm wrong, the faces of the Republican Party, the Lauren Boeberts, the Marjorie Taylor Greens, they're right-wing conspiracy theorists. I mean, it seems like Trump started this trend. Would you agree with that? And do you believe that that's kind of where the alt-right is these days?
Well, again, I'm not here to say who started it. I'm here to say it does not reflect the values, the priorities of who we are as a people. And this is why we need every single listener of your program, voter, to know just how important their voice is in this process. And I'll say this, look, I know people get frustrated. I know people turn off in midterms. I know that with the escalating cost of living, that people are feeling the pain. But that is not a reason to give up on our democracy. That is not a reason to allow those who are the election deniers to prevail. That is not a reason to let an ideologically driven Supreme Court or conservatives in Congress to take away people's freedoms to make their own healthcare decisions or to not move forward on the priorities that we need as a nation. And so I'm appealing to your listeners and people all throughout my district who will listen. Please vote this upcoming election. Your voice matters. Your vote matters. And the future of our nation, the soul of our nation is at stake.
Last question, Congressman. And again, we really do appreciate your time. You decided to enter public life years ago, and it's not something that I would want to do, but it seems like, there are politicians out there, they go after people's personal life, and things that should be private become public. You've had to deal with that with your family. It's not my business, but yet it seems like the people that have gone after you on the right have no problem with Donald Trump having 25 women accusing him of sexual assault or rape, but they want to go after you. You had a private issue there. And I want to ask you, how has that affected you? How do you deal with that? You and your family, how do you deal with being in public like and everything being magnified? No human being is perfect. We all make mistakes, right? How have you been able to deal with that over the years? And has that been difficult for you and difficult for your family to have all of your personal information out there for everybody to see?
Well, first, Brian, the person that mattered the most in this situation to me was my apology to my wife and my children and my family. In the end, they're the ones that need to hear that apology the most. Of course, I regret and have taken ownership for my actions, but to be clear, my voters are focused on their lives, the issues that they're dealing with, from the cost of living to childcare to prescription drugs, to making sure that we can protect their fundamental rights. And so I have continued to do my job, and I will continue to do my job. I know voters will ultimately have to make decisions, and there is a clear choice between me and my opponent. And I'm willing to put my record of achievement, of legislation, of hard work of fighting to get people trained and placed in jobs with the Culinary Academy, to my record in the state Senate, to now in Congress over anyone, including my opponent. And so all I have to say is the people that matter to me most, those who I love the most in my life, I have sought to give them the healing and the apology that they need so that we can move forward and to live healthy and productive lives well into the future.
Well, Congressman, I'll say this. I've always supported you. You're going to defeat Sam Peters. I have no doubt about that. I believe you to be a good man, passionate. I know you care about this community. You care about where you work and the people you represent. And I know how busy you are. So I do appreciate you coming on. Love to have you on again, maybe before the elections, Congressman. And I really do appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brian. Great to be on. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to coming back.
Thank you, Congressman. Appreciate you. That is Congressman Stephen Horsford joining us. Hey, I mean everything I just said. I support him. He's not perfect. Nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect. He's done a good job. He's done a good job. He's not a far to the left crazy person or a far to the right crazy person. I believe he's a reasonable man. And by the way, when that story came out about his affair, which was a personal story, he did apologize and he didn't lie. He owned it. We have no idea what's going on, within his family. And by the way, it's not my business. Here's what I do know. Nobody's ever accused Stephen Horsford of sexual assault. Nobody's ever accused him of rape. But some of the people that want to go after Stephen Horsford for having an affair are the same people that voted for Donald Trump. His own ex-wife, who just sadly passed away, by the way, accused Donald Trump of rape in court documents. But they'll vote for Donald Trump. But if there's a story of a Democrat that might have had an affair, let's go after him. Again, I said it in the first segment, it is the definition of hypocrisy. And when I heard Stephen Horsford speak at this Moms Demand Action rally, I met him for the first time a few months ago. I loved his passion. I loved, and and again, I don't love to hear about death, but it's a personal story. And Horsford talked about his father who died at the hands of a gun violence in Las Vegas, by the way. And he talked about how he drives past that area where his father was murdered just about every single day. That is a personal story, and the pain and the suffering that he and his family have had to go through. He is passionate about gun control. He's passionate about a lot of issues, by the way. I love his passion. And he's right. He is right. He's right on the gun control issues. He's right about affordable housing and lowering rent. He's right about the abortion issue. He's right about the January 6th. He's right about a lot of things. And I might not agree with him on everything, but on the really, really important issues that are facing not just Las Vegas and the state of Nevada, but the entire country, I agree with him. And it's not because I'm a Democrat, because I'm not. I am an independent, but I support Stephen Horsford because I believe him to be a decent human being who is logical, who is reasonable, that does not spread lies every day like so many of these people on the far right do. And I do believe he cares about this community. I do. He grew up here. He's lived here almost his entire life. He knows this town better than anybody. And whatever is going on in his personal life, that is personal, and that is for him to figure out. That is not my business. But I asked him, what is that like to be out there? I mean, I can't even imagine how difficult that is on your family whenever, listen, if you have some sort of affair, it affects your immediate family and your friends know about it, not the entire city, not the entire state. Everybody knew what was going on with him. I can't imagine how difficult that must be. But he is still with his beautiful wife, his family. And I support Stephen Horsford 110%. Not because he's a Democrat, because he's a decent human being. And I agree with him on some of the most important issues facing this city, facing this state, and facing the country. And I appreciate him taking the time to join us. And I hope that people vote for Stephen Horsford, because I'll tell you right now, while I appreciate Sam Peters risking his life for this country. He'll always be a hero. He is a right-wing nut. He is a right-wing kook. I don't want right-wing kooks who spread election lies in any office. I don't want them as an assemblyman, let alone as a congressman. I'm telling you right now, Sam Peters ain't going to win. Stephen Horsford's going to win re-election. Sam Peters is not going to win. Steve Sisolak is going to remain our governor in the great state of Nevada. Catherine Cortez Masto is going to win re-election. So if you think some of these right-wing kooks are going to win, you better think again, folks, because it ain't going to happen, because it's up. The people who spread these elections